Hello and welcome to this week's, well, it's not a review, it's more of a guide, a buyer's guide, and it's focused on your listening room. So, questions. Have you just moved in or will you be soon moving house? Maybe your listening room is a bit on the echoey side, or maybe your hi-fi sounds a bit harsh and you've never really fathomed out why. Well, this video looks to get to the bottom of that particular conundrum and examines the most important part of your hi-fi system, the listening room. Well, hang on, you cry, I've just spent £50,000 on a new hi-fi, so pull the other one. Yes, even in this rather far-fetched, I have to admit, scenario, the listening room is tops for importance. If you don't get the acoustics right, then there is absolutely no level playing field. So you never begin your search for great sound quality from a stable foundation. If you don't attend to your room, you start building your hi-fi on the basis of one thing, and that one thing is trouble. This means that no matter what you do with the hi-fi itself, no matter how much money you spend on it, there will always be issues with the final sound. It will never, ever sound quite right. There will always be irritations. More to the point, you'll never get the best out of your hi-fi. Hence, you'll effectively be throwing money down the drain. Why? Well, what's the point of spending £300 or £3,000 or £30,000 on a hi-fi if you only ever hear 70% of its capabilities? Now, if you want to skip and just look at the items I used to damp my room, then you can do. Just nip down below in the description. I've got some chapter headings down there. Click on those. It will fast forward you to that section of the video. What I'm going to talk about right now is a bit of an introduction, why you need to damp your room, my experiences when I walked into this room for the first time, and all that kind of stuff. So, what am I actually babbling on about? What do I mean when I declare that the room is important to the final sound? Well, the last time I moved house into this place, a fair few years ago now, I have to admit, I was very fortunate to be able to find a place with a dedicated listening room, and that's what this is. On the face of it, this room, when you walked into it, seemed absolutely perfect. It was large, lots of natural light, and more. And I'm currently standing in that little dog leg bit of the L at the bottom there. Now, if you imagine that vertical part of the L, there are large windows, floor-to-ceiling windows. And as I sit in my listening chair and I look at my hi-fi, to the left are two solid wooden doors. The floor, well, that's solid wood as well. Initially, it had no carpeting. Now, when I first walked into this room, my heart fluttered with possibilities. And the first thought I had was to test the acoustics. And I used the best tool that money can buy to test those acoustics. These, the Mark I human hands. I stood at the center of this room and I did what comes naturally. I clapped. And the result? Oh dear. Not only did the echo rebound around the room like a pinball table and seem to take half an hour to stop, but there was so much of the stuff. It actually, and I actually tell no lies here, it actually went boing. For a second, I felt like I was living in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I can tell you this right now, if I had to set up my hi-fi in this space as I initially walked into it, without modifying it in any way, the sound of my hi-fi would be a complete and utter disaster. The stereo image wouldn't be. The soundstage, well, that would resemble a scene from a terrorist attack, and the accompanying instruments would be bright and screechy. In a word, nasty. The problem with the room at that point was that there were too many points of reflection. Too many areas were exposed, so that the sound bounced off the walls, off the floor, off the ceiling, off those doors, off those windows. So what I heard had no order, it had no discipline. Each of those rebounding sounds were reaching my ears at different times, at different speeds, and from different angles. Much of it unwanted, and much of it highly unstable. More to the point, in this state, I just couldn't trust my HiFi system, and I did try. I did listen to it. If I tested equipment in this atmosphere, in this room, as was, I wouldn't know if a negative point was the result of the product or the room. For you as a music fan, you would find the same thing happening to your system. So were the band off when they recorded LP X, or was it the room? Is this a terrible master I'm hearing, or is it the room? Surely the sax player on this track can't be all that bad, or maybe it's the room? So as I stood there thinking about what to do, I clapped my hands once more. Boing, said the room. Whereupon my heart well and truly dropped. If I had any ambitions to get some work done, if I actually wanted to pay my gas bill, much effort needed to be spent on this room first. I wanted to bring a measure of control to the room in acoustic terms. I also wanted to not hear the room itself. The room had to be out of the way, invisible in broad terms, neutral, so that any sound elements I was hearing was a result of the HiFi as a connected unit and the source itself. So there were two issues facing me now. The first was money. All my savings were dedicated to getting out of the old house and moving in to the new house and setting up the new house itself, of course. Yes, I did have a doing up the house budget, something I'd already saved for over a long period, but not a over and above specialist studio deadening equipment budget, if you get my drift. Specialist fittings, therefore, were out. So if I was going to solve the problems inherent in my room, I was going to have to do it on the cheap. So I couldn't afford specialist studio type solutions. Although actually, I don't particularly like having those solutions in my house. I'm not a massive fan of those 5-foot tall pieces of Toblerone hanging off my wall, or eggshell boxes stuck to the ceiling. I happen to want my listening room to look civilized. I don't want it to look like a garage with microphones. I wanted my room to look like it belonged to my room and not a professional studio. Professional studios are nice places to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Now, many will disagree with me on that one, but we all have our own aesthetic standards. And I just wanted a home, not a studio. So, without going specialist, and also, just as important to me, being able to cure my room without antagonizing my wife, what could I do? Well, I came up with a plan that was, of course, great for my own circumstances. Now, I'm not expecting that the following will be the ultimate solution for you and your own particular room problems. That's not going to happen, I understand that. That said, you might be able to get something from my own experiences. If not direct advice, then maybe I can point you in the right direction here. Also, while some of the items listed here can be yours for genuinely little cash, other items do cost a little bit more. In addition, you'll have to allow for my tastes, which may very well be poles apart from your own. So what I'm going to do is look at each part of my room in turn and recommend some bits and pieces for you to damp each and every little bit. And then hopefully the room itself will be cured, as it were. First off, well, let's look at the walls. To begin, well, I have to quickly say here that in terms of massaging a relatively small budget, thank goodness for IKEA. Now, I might have been a tad enthusiastic at IKEA because I basically cleared out the local IKEA store's stocks of Kallax storage units, as you can see here. Now, Kallax is the current name for the storage units divided into handy LP-size pods. They come in all shapes and sizes, and hence prices, and hold LPs, yes, but also box sets of all types, CDs, and books, and more. They also did a great job in damping the walls of my reverb-laden listening room, and at a low price as well, especially when you filled the Kallax with vinyl and the like. Walls, done. Well, mostly, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Next, the floor. Now, as I say, I have wooden floors, so I opted for rugs. Now, many wooden floors can be slippery, so if you're going to put a rug on top of a wooden floor, don't forget to put anti-slip material underneath the rug. As for rugs, well, have you seen the price of rugs lately? And I mean rugs that look cheap and nasty and tacky. They're still expensive and not particularly large or even hard wearing. After much discussion and thought, I opted for a slightly different solution: second-hand Persian rugs. Now, Persian rugs are incredibly well made, and I'm talking about the hand-woven examples here, not the machine-created examples, which I would not recommend. Persian rugs can cover large areas when required and will last years and years, no matter what punishment you give them. If you buy them new, well, they're laughably expensive. So what I would recommend is you go hunting on eBay, where you can find some very nice bargains. Well, relatively, of course. Now, these second-hand Persian rugs are often worn in spots, but hey, they still look good, and often you can just hide the worn bit with a speaker or something. I actually feel that the worn areas give them a sense of character and a sense of the antique. Being made of organic materials, they also lower static, which was also in my head at the time when I chose them. So, floors, done. Next, ceilings. Now, my listening room has two pendant lights. So basically a single wire with a bulb connection at the end dangling from the ceiling. And I was also aware that the ceiling is a possibly troublesome reflective surface. Well, there's so much of it, hey. So what I wanted here were two light shades that firstly, well, actually shaded. I don't know how many modern shades I saw that still showed the light bulb, which I thought, well, what's the point of that? It actually does a great job of blinding the bejesus out of you whenever you accidentally looked at it. So I looked for a light shade that actually covered the whole bulb. Now I selected two shades that covered the whole bulb, and because there was more of this shade, I felt it worked better as a damping tool. So I trotted back to IKEA and found two flying saucer shaped objects, both pitted with holes and full of texture and lots of material and cheap. Mine, well, they were £5 each. Ceiling, basically done. So I resumed clapping. I clapped all the way around the room. It was a lot better now. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. The amount of reverb had definitely reduced now. I also noticed that parts of the room were a lot better than other parts. The biggest issue were those large panes of glass, those floor-to-ceiling glass windows I mentioned. Now, I'm based in the UK, and here in the UK is a sort of interiors store called Dunelm. This is one of those large, out-of-town kind of places. You find them on industrial estates, that kind of place. And they sell lots of furniture and bed linen and all kinds of bits and bobs. I went there looking for curtains at a reasonably low price. Now, after checking on the measurements of my room and also the windows, I selected the heaviest curtains I could find. More than that, after some research into acoustics, I also decided on curtains that, when hung, would produce lots and lots of folds. So both the weight of the material and also the folds would have an effect on the room sound. So I put them up and I did the old clapping routine by the glass windows, and I couldn't hear any weird echo effect, no reverb. It had gone, and what really amazed me was that the curtains didn't have to be closed to produce the beneficial damping effect, which meant I didn't have to work with them closed and with the light on during the day. Thank goodness. So, windows done. The room was now a lot better, almost complete in acoustic terms, but still there were patches of reverb here and there. The secret here is to walk around the room constantly clapping. So when you do the old clapping routine around your room, what are you listening for? Well, you're listening for excessive echo. You're listening for a delay. You're listening for that clap to be coming back at you with a half-second delay, maybe more, maybe less, but you can hear that delay. If you clap in different parts of the room and you don't hear an additional echo, you're fine. Move on to another part of the room. I would actually go into corners. I would actually clap near to a wall. I would actually go to that wall. I wouldn't just stand in the middle of the room and clap and be done with it. I would walk around the room into different parts of the room and I would clap near a wall, near a corner, near the ceiling. I would clap near windows, and use your ears and see if you get any nasty echoes. You'll notice different parts of the room will give you more echo effect, more reverb than other bits of the room. Any part of the room that gives you that nasty little echo effect, that needs damping. If you clap in different parts of your room and you hear a distinct echo coming back at you, well, wherever you are in that room, that's the part that needs attention. So if there's variation in that echo, you know there's an echo spot somewhere. Just clap a few times in a particular area and you'll actually be able to hear where the reverb is bouncing from. In my case, I had two relatively small flat areas of wall, and in addition to that, 3 corners. These 5 parts were giving me heartache. The solutions for the walls were to hang up pictures. Now, I'm quite lucky because my wife happens to be an artist and she does acrylic on canvas, amongst other things. So I grabbed a couple of her originals and I put them on the wall, and that solved the case. Now, I mentioned acrylic on canvas for a reason, because if you buy pictures and put them on the wall, hoping to damp that area of your room, if you use pictures which are canvassed, it'll work. If you buy pictures and there's a glass front, well, you're back to square one, because the sound will bounce off the glass and that will give you that echo effect. So I highly recommend you buy pictures with no glass on the front, only canvas. Canvas does the job, glass does not. So All I was left with was 3 dodgy corners of my room that were giving me little bits of echo. So what did I do? Well, I went back to IKEA. I wish I had shares in the blasted place. Now I say great store because I was able to find a new, tall, floor-standing lamp with perfect textured shading, kind of a papery type of shade. Inside, you can fit 1 to 3 bulbs, so you can vary the intensity. Complete bargain. Corners, therefore, done. Now, of course, you might question my interior design fashion sense, but with all of these things, my priority was sound and sound only. It all worked, and for me, that was the main thing as far as I was concerned. Once all of this stuff was installed and fitted in my room, I then jumped around the room and I clapped like a crazy madman. There wasn't one excessive piece of echo to be heard. The entire room was successfully damped. Hurrah! For me, ultimately, the before and the after experience was pretty incredible. I went from a boing situation to a neutral situation with nothing more than a bit of interior design. The effort and the cash spent was well worth it. Now I could listen to the hi-fi and the music being played, not the ceiling, not the floor, and not the walls. Oh, and one final thing before I go. When you do that clap measurement, you don't want to hear excessive echo, sure, but you don't want that noise to sound like it's coming from a padded cell. You don't want to go too far. This is all about balance, and you don't want to damp excessively. Don't forget that echo in small doses is valuable. That's how sound gets to your ears. If you restrict that vibration, that echo too much, then you're not going to get all the detail. And that's what would happen, say, if you walked into a room and the sofa was covered in velvet and you had heavy velvet curtains and there were, say, rugs on the wall, and it was just too much. And you walk in to this space, and when you talk, you don't feel as though your words are moving very far from your mouth. Have you ever experienced that situation? That's the kind of over-damping I'm talking about. It's just too much. You go too far. So don't forget, balance is where it's at. You don't want an obvious echo, but you don't want to deaden completely the room. And that's it, folks. If you need any help on what I've been nattering on about, by all means, contact me down below in the comments and I'll help as best as I can. Now, before I go, I just want to thank you for staying to the end of this video. And if I could ask you downstairs just to click on the subscribe and the like buttons if you haven't already done so. Also, in the description, there are chapter headings so you can navigate around the room. There's also other links to my website and my Patreon page, and any support you can give me on Patreon is much appreciated. Helps to fund this channel, folks. Also, there's a link to my Facebook group down there, and obviously you're welcome to join that if you'd like. And I'll be back on Friday with hi-fi news, etc. We've got lots of goodies for you as per usual, and I hope to see you then. Until that time, folks, bye-bye for now.